Hey everybody, welcome back to 10% True, and this is the third in my short series of videos combining passages from my Strike Eagle book, Be Afraid of the Dark Part 1, with footage from the forthcoming Razbam DCS F-15E module. If you didn't catch the announcement, the ebook version of Be Afraid of the Dark is going to be bundled for free with that module. Today we're going to look at the Strike Eagle's radar mapping and ground target moving indicator capabilities. The patch mapping capability was a feature that until the introduction of the F-15E to service had only been available to the OV-1 Mohawk, which carried a large side-looking radar in an elongated pod below the aircraft. And prior to the advent of high-resolution radar mapping, radar acquisition and designation of ground targets for fighter aircrew at least had been somewhat primitive. And for fighter aircrew, using radar was a time-consuming affair that required considerable skill, constant tuning, and many hours of classroom and practical radar interpretation training in order to become proficient. And like so many components of the F-15E program, synthetic aperture radar would reshape the way in which ground targets were detected, identified, and designated from a fighter. It was a highly complex technology that centered around mathematical algorithms and was made possible because of new hardware circuitry added to the APG-70 radar. But the most impressive aspect of the APG-70's SAR capability was that it could be interpreted in real time. SAR allowed almost photographic quality radar pictures to be taken that, when displayed on one of the MPDs, gave the crew a bird's eye view of the scanned area. In simple terms, the radar transmits a pulse and then notes changes in amplitude and the phase of the echoes, and these changes are translated into a video output that's displayed in a picture that's recognizable to the human eye. To achieve this, the radar is tilted to direct its energy at the ground, and data is collected in a process known as mapping. As the aircraft moves forwards, more and more data is collected as the radar continues to map a designated patch of ground, and once enough data is received, it's computed as a single data file. The algorithms siphon out the radar returns caused by ground features from those caused by the aircraft's own movements over the ground, and the resulting image is then displayed to the aircrew for analysis. To be effective, the crew have to follow a few guidelines when using the high-resolution mapping mode. Mapping is more effective if the area of interest is put to either side of the nose, as a three-dimensional radar picture of the target is much easier to create from one side or the other, and mapping a target directly in front of the aircraft requires excessive amounts of time to create an image. So a software limit was implemented for the Strike Eagle that prevented the crew from patch mapping straight ahead of the jet, and this zone is referred to as the blind zone. It extends plus or minus 8 degrees of the aircraft's center line. The angle either side of the nose is referred to as the squint angle. Grazing angle restrictions require the vertical angle between the radar beam and the ground to fall within certain constraints also. The best patch maps result from mapping at between 2 degrees and 10 degrees of grazing angle, as this provides a good mix of horizontal and vertical target returns. High grazing angles, so above 20 degrees, result in one-dimensional images being produced because the mapped area lacks contrast. Low grazing angles result in vertical targets dominating the subsequent radar picture and overpowering the image. Antenna elevation is automatically controlled by the radar in the HRM mode, requiring only that the pilot climb sufficiently enough to create the desired grazing angle. A software routine predicts how long the patch map will take under current conditions. The radar cursors are placed over the area of interest, and a dynamic readout displays the time required in seconds. The closer the aircraft is to the target, the greater the resolution, and therefore the more detailed the picture. Aircrew can alter the resolution on the map based on predefined software-controlled tables that automatically rescale the radar display, it's also known as the range window, configure the radar, and permit only valid resolution selections. HRM supplemented the real beam mapping mode, or RBM, That's a low-resolution mapping and weather detection mode that was already implemented in the APG-63 and then carried over to the APG-70. RBM was a fast and simple mode that was drift stabilised up to plus or minus 10 degrees in azimuth and scanned at a rate of 95 degrees per second. The APG-70 improved this mode through a 2-to-1 beam sharpening process that provided a sharper picture. A GMT or ground moving target mode was also available, and this detected moving targets on the ground, and it was a key mode for detecting armour or motorised infantry, and one from which the crew could hand off to an integrated optical infrared tracking system, which would eventually turn out to be Lantern for the subsequent attack with guided or unguided weapons. The system also featured dedicated support for the AGM-65 Maverick series of standoff guided missiles and allowed for an interleaved ground moving target mode where the GMT image could be merged with that of the RBM. By the end of the dual-role fighter competition, Hughes and McAir had not only proved the APG-70 radar to the Air Force, but had hammered the point home. By way of illustration, the F-15E's circular error probable was significantly smaller than that of the F-111DF that it was going to replace. At night, using radar designation and steering alone, the dual-role fighter achieved a CEP of 10 metres. That's to say that if it dropped 6 bombs, 3 of those would fall within 10 metres of the target. This was further reduced to 5 metres when using the PaveTac pod that McAir had installed on the demonstrator. Of course, eventually, the Strike Eagle would be equipped with the Lantern system instead. The F-111DF, under the same conditions, could only muster a CEP of 24 metres. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you soon.